All right. Okay. So as I was saying, by the end of tomorrow, if you could get your um, just the beginning of your drawing in, don't post a complete drawing. It's almost heartbreaking when I see someone with a completed drawing and they're asking for feedback, and it's, there's something that could have been easily adjusted early on. So there's something to do with composition or scale, or, there's just something about it that would have been a matter of taking a few minutes to adjust if we'd had a chance to look at it early on. But it's a complete drawing, and maybe it might be impossible to make the kind of change that needs to be changed. um, and so then, it comes down to the question, what do I do? Do I start over again? And so to avoid that, what I'm asking you to do is, when you get to a stage where you've done all your blocking in, you've got your basic shapes in place, your composition is the way you want it to be, then at that stage, when we can clearly see where you're heading with it, but you haven't done the shading or added the details that you're going to be adding, um, get it into CoreSpaces, into the forum, let your group take a look at it, give each other some feedback. I'm going to do my best to keep up with it as well. I do have the grading that I'm so far not getting a lot done on grading, because I've been wanting to keep up with the posts that you've been making in the forum. So I will do my best to keep an eye on things, but you're really relying on your group members. So use the prompts that are in the forums to guide you with the kind of feedback or the kind of critiques that you offer your peers. At this stage, you should be able to, give some constructive criticism. Of course, we want to be sensitive to the fact that, this is somebody's drawing, and, we don't want to tear them down, but we do need to be honest when something's not quite there, or, something about it isn't right. We need to be able to tell the person what that something is. Okay? So some of you have posted your visual journal entry for your first drawing, and for some of those people, I have made some comments to them personally about just wanting to spend a little bit more time in the visual journal. I said last time we met that I don't, I'm going to provide, and I did provide you with a checklist of things to include in your visual journal. But I don't want to, give the impression that creating a visual journal means going through a checklist, and you don't necessarily have to have everything in your visual journal that's on the list. At the same time, you want to make sure that you're doing a thorough exploration, so that you're really clear on not just what your subject matter is, but how you're approaching that subject matter. And you want to continue to hold on to the things that you have been practicing so far. So, what is it from drawings 1 through 4 that you can bring to this first focus drawing? What are the tools, the techniques that are going to help you with it? So, in some cases, it might be that you need to use 1-point perspective, for example. Don't forget about atmospheric perspective. There's a list that I put into CoreSpaces called best practice. And in that list, it kind of reminds you of some of those things in it, and it gives you some suggestions about what you can bring to your drawing. If you have questions about what any of those things mean, you need a reminder, let me know. There's a whole bunch of videos, as you know, in CoreSpaces that you might want to go back to some of them. There's some items under the optional resources that you haven't looked at yet, perhaps. If you're having trouble finding something, please be in touch, and I'll help you find what you're looking for. One last thing before I go to the lesson or the slides and the audio or I won't do the audio, but before I go to the slides for the focus drawing, I lost my train of thought there. I was going to tell you one more thing and I just forgot what it is. It'll come back to me perhaps. So I'll move to screen sharing for the slides. Okay. I know that some of you have looked at this, but I think it maybe helps to just, you know, I won't say things exactly the same way that I say them in the audio. When you are working in your visual journal, at that point, you should be thinking about what are the issues that I'm going to address here? And so here we have a list of that give you examples of what it's meant by issues. So I think that in pretty well every case with your drawing, you're dealing with light and shade. Obviously, you're dealing with line quality, because that's when we talked about, you know, what's the difference between drawing and painting. That's one of the things that we noted, is that, you know, that line is really, that's what drawing is, line, and then of course the mark making. So there's rendering of form, composition. Surface manipulation, we haven't really talked about specifically, so I'm going to get into that with you next week, and also layering, and then illusion of depth. I'm just going to skip over a lot of the examples here. That I mentioned mark making, we've talked about that before. Please do take note of the learning outcomes. So I put these learning outcomes into the resource that's called Focus Drawing Guide. So that's a little book, and it has a table of contents, so you can easily go to each item. And I sent some of you a personal little note with what you had uploaded in the form for your visual journal for this drawing. And then I also posted this in the news forum to really pay attention when you're creating your visual journal entries. This is this part, number 1, the inquiry-based approach. That's something you really want to be aware of, because this is what I use when I grade your, not just your drawings, but your visual journal entries as well. So as I said, you don't have to keep coming back to the slides to find the learning outcomes. They're in that guide that's in Course Spaces. Anybody, when you looked at this slide, did you recognize the cowboy on the horse, or on the bucking bronco? I quite enjoy this drawing. This list is also in that book that I just mentioned, so you don't have to keep coming back here to take a look at it. So these things are a guide, they're not a checklist, but do make sure that you include thumbnail sketches. You need to be really clear about how you're using your drawing paper before you start working on it. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of, you know, make a lot of lines and do a lot of erasing. And if you're in the blocking in stage, that you know, the sort of shadow of those marks is not likely to be there. But if you press very hard with your pencil, you do start to leave marks behind even after erasing. So the idea is that you have a really clear idea of what you're doing before you start on your drawing paper. And you're remembering that every mark that's on your paper is part of your drawing, whether it's meant to be there or not, it is part of the drawing. There are some artists who focus on drawing who will actually do a whole drawing on, you know, on a less expensive piece of paper. In your case, you don't need to worry, you know, you don't have really high quality paper, but paper can get very expensive. You know, you can be working on a piece of like 18 by say 24 paper, and that piece of paper could be, you know, as much as $10 or even more. So you don't want to be intimidated by it, but you also don't want to go through sheets and sheets of that. So what they will do is they will actually work out the whole drawing on a less expensive piece of paper that's the same size, and then they will project it, or they will use some kind of method to copy that drawing on the cheaper paper onto their good paper, and then develop the drawing from there. I'm not saying that you have to do that, just saying that, you know, often drawings that you see as finished drawings, they weren't, it wasn't just that one piece of paper that the artist worked on. There was often steps involved in that. So when you were working through your first 4 drawings, you were introduced to all of these things that you see here on this list. And just, I know I've said it a few times already, but you really want to keep going back to those things. That's your toolkit. That's what you have learned so far and what you want to rely on for your drawings. So in week 5, and this gets back to what I was forgetting that I wanted to mention earlier on, I'm going to be including a few things for you that we haven't talked about yet. I mentioned that we're going to be talking about surface manipulation. We're going to be talking about the layered surface. And I'm also going to be getting into color. And some of you are showing me in your visual journals that you have some different media, color media. Seeing pencil crayon, I'm seeing felt pens. I don't think I've seen any pastel yet, but I know that some of you have taken other art ed courses and you might have some of those materials. You're not required to work in color, but I'm guessing that some of you want to, or you at the very least would like to know how to use color. So there will be a lesson on that next time, and then, or next week. And then if you want to use that, you can. I'm also going to give you a little bit of information about metamorphosis or transformation. And if you choose to use some of that in your drawing, you can. You do not have to use any of the things that I introduced in week 5. So this is an example of something we haven't looked at yet, where, you know, we're seeing Diego's head 3 times. And it can make for a very interesting drawing if you keep going over what you've already done and adding more lines to it. And again, these steps are in the book that's in Course Spaces. So the things that you're including, the things that you're wanting to think about, and you know, what you're posting. When you post into the forums, make sure you're looking at the items that I'm asking you to critique. So there's a list there, and go through it and offer your peers as much as you can. You know, hit on as many of those points as you can. Most of your critique is not going to be things like, sometimes when I provide a checklist or a guide like you see in the forums, what I find people will do is they'll say, yes, I see this. Yes, you've done this. So avoid that. And, you know, if you can't find, you see it as being done, there's nothing that needs to be corrected or improved, say what it is you see and why you think it's done. I'm not asking you to write a book here. You want to keep your comments brief. I understand that. Question for you, and if you could use audio, because I'm screen sharing and I don't see the chat right now. is, can you use audio in your critiques? I'm not sure if that function is available in there for you.
I don't think, well, I've never seen like a student like post audio, so I can't really say.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's too bad, because I know for some of you that would make it a little bit easier than having to type all your comments. Yeah. But my point is that at this stage, there shouldn't be anybody who's offering a critique that says, I like your drawing, you did a good job. That is not a critique. You need to be looking at it like, could this be better? Yes, acknowledge that so far it's good. So far, you know, it works, if that's the case. Do you want to be honest? But you need to go beyond and say, you know, ask yourself, you know, is this the best drawing I've ever seen? And if the answer is no, then why? What is it that you're noticing about the drawing that could make it stronger? And maybe you see a strength in part of the drawing, but it's not consistent. Or maybe you see the drawing is on the wrong, you know, the wrong size paper. So, you know, you might have seen some examples of that in the very first drawing with the popcorn drawing, where we're working on a rectangle and the person's piece of popcorn would fit better in a square. And I know I made that comment to at least a couple of people, is to suggest that the paper needed to be cropped into more of a square, because the subject that they were drawing just would never fit in a rectangle. So things like that are really important for you to notice and for you to offer that feedback for a person. And then the last item here, post your drawing again when it's complete. So next week, early on next week, hopefully before Tuesday, you will have your completed drawing. So you'll be posting it on Friday, hopefully, you know, by the end of the day on Friday, at a very early stage, waiting to get feedback from 2 of your peers. In most cases, you're in groups of 6. There is one group A, that only has 4 people in it. But the rest of you have 6 people in your group. And so you're getting feedback or critique from 2 of your peers. After you're getting that critique, then you're going to your drawing and you're continuing it. And when it's complete or nearly complete, you're posting it again. So that should be no later than before we meet again on Tuesday. And at that stage, it's up to your peers as to whether or not they critique your work again. I would suggest a second critique if you see something that's really glaring. Hopefully there won't be, because you've caught it when it was posted the first time. Or, you know, if a drawing looks like it's going well, but it needs a you know, quite a bit more, then you might want to jump in and, you know, offer a bit of a critique. But if it's a finished drawing and you don't see any issues with it, you know, you're not required to critique that second time. Okay. So I also included with this slideshow these examples of student drawings. So she did a series of 7 drawings. So this was done in a 12-week course where students were asked to do a series of a minimum of 5 drawings for their focus drawings. So they had 1 more than you did. So she worked on a slightly smaller format. Her drawings ranged in size from, I don't think I recorded the sizes, but about 5 by 7 to 6 by 8. There might have been an 8 by 10 in there as well. But they were smaller drawings. She did a lot of life drawing. So at UVic, and the art gallery, or the art gallery where I have my studio, actually does life drawing. They're doing them online right now. So if you're interested in life drawing, if that's kind of where you're going with your focus drawings, let me know and I can give you some information about how you could attend those sessions online and draw from a model. So that's what she was doing, a lot of life drawing, but she was also interviewing people that she knew very well and asking them her question, her research question, which was, what does depression feel like? And I won't play the audio for you here, but you can listen to that if you haven't already. It was quite a moving series of drawings. And as she said in her one of her artist statements, it was sometimes, well, at first it was definitely uncomfortable for her to share her drawings with the whole class, because it was so personal, so raw, and she revealed so much of herself. So put herself in a really space where she was very vulnerable. I wanted to include some of her writing in this because I think it's a really good example of how, again, she allowed herself to be in a place where she felt vulnerable and to be honest in her statements about her artwork. And it made her work much more meaningful, and it also allowed us to really connect with her and get to know her. So a lot of her writing is in the audio, and it's there because it's meant to inspire you, kind of encourage you, and sort of to raise the bar as far as what happens with your own writing. I'm going through these really quickly, but I do hope that you will take the time to spend a little bit more time with these. Yeah. Okay, so that's it for that. And I'm wondering if there's any questions at this stage about anything that you're being asked to do. Okay, looks like not. So I will let you go, and definitely keep the posts coming. At the beginning, I was making all of my comments about the visual journal, the visual journal entry for your research question. I was making all of my comments so that everybody could read them, but I have started making all my comments private, so just you are receiving the comment about your work. And then if I find myself repeating quite often, I'll just do like I did earlier this afternoon and do an announcement. No, Francis, you are not too late to fix visual journals entries for your topic. In fact, I would say if I'm still, responding to you, if I've responded to you and said, your question isn't clear, or your focus is too broad, you need to be more specific. And hopefully I've offered you, some suggestions. If I have enough information from you, I have attempted to suggest a question or suggest how you might narrow your focus. I do think, or I highly recommend that you stay with that visual journal entry and continue developing it. Because if you don't spend the time at the beginning getting this sorted out, and you're not starting off with a good question and a good topic, you're going to really struggle with the drawings. So you'll find that, once you've got that very first visual journal entry done, you're firm on it, it's really going to dictate what goes in the remaining visual journal entries, and you're not going to be floundering and trying to figure out what is it I'm drawing, what's my subject matter. That'll all be really clear for you. Are there any other questions? No, everyone's good? All right, well, I will say goodbye until next time. Okay.